You're listening to the Jōrni Podcast. What happens when you're low on the mineral that powers over 300 vital functions in the body? Tune in today to find out. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer, and with decades of experience with sadness, pain, anxiety, and stress, I finally figured out how to leave all that behind. And this podcast shows you how to break free permanently so you can reclaim your sanity and find the self-esteem and energy to go after the life you desire. With real talk about mental health, holistic healing, and the tough journey of coming out the other end. This is the Jōrni Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. In this episode, we take a closer look at magnesium and why it plays such a crucial role in overall health. Our guest shares how a personal struggle with anxiety, chronic pain, and insomnia led to a surprising discovery about this essential mineral and how it can support everything from mood and energy to sleep and stress management. Natalie Jurado is the founder of Rooted In, a line of therapeutic magnesium-infused moisturizers that actively calm and relax your mood. She's a sought-after thought leader, educator, and speaker, and has worked at the forefront of the wellness industry for over 8 years. Natalie is considered an expert in all things magnesium, and her mission is to spread awareness of its incredible benefits. After experiencing firsthand how magnesium transformed her own struggles with anxiety, chronic pain, and insomnia, she now dedicates her work to helping others reclaim their health and vitality through natural healing. Here is my interview with Natalie Jurado. Hi, Natalie. It's so great to have you on the podcast today. I've been looking forward to getting to chat with you because magnesium is such a fantastic topic and we've actually never done an episode on it. So I'm excited to dive in with you and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm excited to be the first person to talk about magnesium on your show. This is always fun.
Yeah, I feel like we've been missing out. So this will be wonderful and great for our listeners across the globe to hear about this, such an important topic for health, for mental health. So this will be a great conversation. So would you like to start us off a little bit, maybe with a bit about yourself and your journey and where that started and how that ties into what you do today, and give our listeners a bit of an insight of what it is that you do today?
Absolutely. So if you had told me 10 years ago that I would one day be completely obsessed with a mineral called magnesium, I would have said you were crazy, right? But that's how so often how stories start. We start with a problem, and I was dealing with quite a few problems. So about 10 years ago, I struggled with anxiety, I struggled with panic attacks, and I had awful, awful insomnia. There were nights where I would only sleep about 2 hours a night. And it was really, really disrupting my life. I was having a hard time driving, taking care of my kids, working. Everything was just kind of flipped upside down. So I did what any normal person would do, and I went to my healthcare practitioner. And she was so gracious. She offered me every single test under the sun. I spent thousands of dollars in copays. And at the end of the day, she sat me down, she looked me straight in the face, and she said, "Natalie, there's nothing wrong with you." She's like, "All of your blood work is normal." And that was the best, worst sentence that I've ever heard in my life, because yes, everything's great and I'm healthy, but on the other side, I'm clearly feeling some disruption in my life. So it really spurred my journey to figure out what's going on. Why do I feel this way? How do I fix it? How do I get to the root of all these issues? And through a wild turn of events, I bumped into an older lady at a farmer's market. We started talking because I can make friends with just about anybody. So I started talking to this complete stranger, and she says, "Have you tried magnesium?" And that was the best question anybody has ever asked me, because I tried it. Within a week, I went from not sleeping to sleeping. And I also had my anxiety started to go away. My panic attacks went away. And I thought, we really need to be talking about this. This is a topic that needs to be brought up in doctors' offices and in healthcare practitioners' offices.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I agree with you. So I can completely sympathize with you on those issues and many more things that happen when we don't get enough magnesium. So let's chat a little bit about maybe what magnesium is. It seems like an obvious thing. You said it's a mineral, but from when we chatted before, there are different types of magnesium. So what are the types of magnesium and what do they do, or do they do different things, and do they affect us differently? Do we digest them differently? So let's start with the basics and ease our listeners into this a little bit.
Absolutely. So, magnesium is a mineral. It's not a drug. You're not going to get addicted to it or anything like that. And it's a mineral that's present in our food. So, when we think of magnesium rich foods, we're thinking of our dark green leafy vegetables, our nuts, our seeds, chia seeds, pumpkin seeds, coconut water, and even dark chocolate. Dark chocolate, the good stuff, not the high sugar stuff, but the good dark chocolate has a wonderful amount of magnesium in it. So, it's simply a mineral that's in our food. But that tiny little mineral packs quite a huge impact because magnesium is literally present in every single one of our trillions of cells within our body. And then on top of that, it's involved in over 700 different reactions in our body. So there's 700 processes that will not function properly without magnesium. So it's vitally important. If we don't have enough magnesium, we would stop living, and we don't want that, right? So it's very, very important that we keep a close eye on our magnesium so all those systems can work properly. But like what you were saying, there's so many types of magnesium. Typically what happens is somebody, hears me talking about magnesium on a podcast, and they're like, I heard some crazy lady talking about magnesium. I think I need some. And then they run out to their local health food store and they see this giant wall of magnesium, right? And they instantly gets overwhelmed. They walk away and they're like, forget it. I'm not doing this. I don't know what I'm doing. So that's the biggest hurdle that people have to cross in order to really figure out what kind of magnesium they need. So and when we're talking about different types, we're simply talking about supplements. We're not talking about diet or any other type of magnesium, but this is simply supplements. So when it comes to those supplements that we could get on Amazon or on health food stores, if the only takeaway that people get today is this, then they are leaps and bounds ahead of everybody else out there. So the most important thing for you to focus on is to make sure that you avoid magnesium oxide. So magnesium oxide is the cheapest, most readily available, most prescribed form of magnesium. And unfortunately, it does not absorb well. Studies show that only about 4% of magnesium oxide actually gets absorbed into your body, and the rest of it's going to go through your digestive tract. And for many people, have them in the bathroom all day. So that is the biggest takeaway I can give anyone is just simply avoid magnesium oxide, and you're doing great.
That sounds really good. And I should have brought my magnesium to look at it and see what it says on there. So, is it important that our listeners choose between, for example, just a readily available magnesium that they can buy at a Walmart or Amazon even, or something a bit more higher quality or even organic? Is there such thing as an organic magnesium? What do you recommend then that our listeners should be looking for?
So, if you are dealing with all the symptoms of magnesium deficiency, so that is your restless legs, your leg cramping, migraines, headaches, insomnia, excessive stress and anxiety, even hormonal imbalance. A lot of the symptoms of menopause can actually be linked to low magnesium. So if we're dealing with all of these symptoms or even some of these symptoms, you will feel, very, very encouraged to go out and buy a supplement. And like I said, this is where it can get a little bit tricky because there's over 14 different forms of magnesium. And so it can feel overwhelming. The forms that are out there, most of them are going to help you just raise your magnesium levels, which is what we want. As long as those levels go up, you're going to start to feel better. But certain forms of magnesium have some additional benefits, right? So if we're talking about, for instance, magnesium glycinate has the additional benefit of helping you with sleep. That's because that magnesium is bound to glycine, and glycine is naturally relaxing. So you're going to get the magnesium and all those great benefits, but you're also going to get a little bit of extra help sleeping. If you take something like a magnesium malate, malate is really great for energy and fatigue. So if you're getting really tired throughout the day, you hit that 3 o'clock slump in the afternoon, take some magnesium malate. Magnesium taurate is particularly helpful for heart health. And magnesium threonate is very helpful for brain health and for memory. So, all of them are going to raise your magnesium levels and help with all those symptoms, but some of them can kind of edge each other out when it comes to those specific issues. And as a result, one of the things that I've created was a cheat sheet that covers 11 different forms of magnesium. You could go on it, find the pros and cons, and figure out which benefit you want and easily choose that form of magnesium.
This is really important information because you don't want to be taking the magnesium that energizes you right before you go to bed, and probably the magnesium that puts you to sleep in the afternoon when you're, supposed to be awake. So this is great information to keep in mind when choosing what kind of magnesium might be helpful, even at which time of the day or in which situation. And before we talk a little bit about, like you said, some of the experiences and symptoms that might happen when you don't get enough magnesium, do you know if there is any, I'm not really sure what it's called, but some of the minerals work best if they're combined with other minerals or vitamins or other substances. So is magnesium one of those things that you need to take with something else? I know that, I think calcium needs to be not taken with magnesium and all these complicated things. Is there something our listeners need to be aware of when it comes to taking magnesium as far as something else that goes with it?
Yeah, so what you're talking about is cofactors. So, what are the cofactors for magnesium that help increase its bioavailability? And that is going to be your vitamin B6 and boron and taurine a little bit. But for the most part, if you're eating a good, well balanced diet, then taking a magnesium supplement, you're going to get those cofactors in your diet, assuming that you're eating a good diet, right? And I always like to mention magnesium is only going to be helpful if you're doing all of the other stuff that you're supposed to, right? So in my case, I was eating a plant-based whole foods diet. Everything was organic. I was exercising. I was maintaining a healthy lifestyle, but I was still feeling awful. So you want to make sure that you've got a good solid diet. You want to make sure that you're managing your stress and your lifestyle properly, and you want to make sure that you're getting some movement in every single day before you decide to start supplementing with magnesium. Because at the end of the day, you cannot supplement your way out of a bad diet, right? We can't eat pizza and nachos and hamburgers and then expect to take a magnesium pill and it's going to solve all our problems. That's never going to happen, right? So always start with a good foundational diet and then add magnesium supplementation on top of that. But like you were saying, if you are going to take a magnesium supplement, there are certain other supplements that you don't want to take at the same time. And what you said is 100% true. Calcium and magnesium, while they do help each other inside of your body, they do work together. But when you're taking them both at the same time, they're going to compete for absorption if you take them at the same time. So we want to space those out about 2 hours apart. Same thing with iron. You don't want to take magnesium and iron at the same time because the magnesium will cancel out that iron. So just keep those things aware if you decide to take a supplement.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what you said is some common sense as well, right? We should be exercising, we should be eating a good diet, like you said, clean diet, organic if possible, and hydrating, doing something for our stress management, which I'm guessing magnesium can be part of that as well. But maybe some mindfulness yoga or some things to help us actually decompress as well. And when we address these common sense items first, then we can supplement with magnesium as well. Now, let's talk a little bit about how we know that we need magnesium, because some things may be a little bit more obvious than other things. So, like you said, if we're experiencing restless legs or maybe we're tired all the time and the tests are all normal. But what are some of the more common things that maybe you have experienced or that you come across when you work with your clients that are common things that people tell you that they're experiencing where magnesium makes sense?
So, like you said, energy, if you are tired all the time, if you're constantly fatigued, and you've already worked with, a healthcare practitioner to rule out some of the big things like thyroid imbalance and that type of thing, and you're still not feeling that energy, it could be because you're low in magnesium. Magnesium plays a really important role in cellular energy. And so, the more magnesium you have, the more energy your body can produce, and the more energized you feel throughout the day. So, energy fatigue is a big one. Difficulty sleeping is a huge one. That is a giant red flag that you need magnesium because magnesium helps activate the parasympathetic nervous system. And that's our like calm down and relax and recover system. So many times we are so stressed out in our society nowadays, and we get stuck in sympathetic mode, which is your go, 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 get all that stuff done mode, right? And we find it hard to transition into parasympathetic. And magnesium really does an incredible job of transitioning you over so that you can start to rest and recover. So that's why it's very effective for sleep. It also helps lower your cortisol levels. Cortisol is our stress hormone, and we need that cortisol to be nice and high in the morning to keep us motivated, but we need it to drop off throughout the day so we can relax. And so oftentimes we either produce too much cortisol or we're shooting up our cortisol at the wrong times. And so magnesium can do a really great job of bringing those cortisol levels down. And that's why it helps so much for anxiety and stress. And we also see people with high cholesterol. That is also a huge red flag that you're low in magnesium. We have what I like to call it, like for simple terms, I like to call it an on-off switch, right? So we've got this on-off switch in our body that creates cholesterol. And when you don't have enough magnesium, that switch doesn't turn off. So magnesium helps turn that switch off so your body doesn't overproduce cholesterol. Same thing with high blood pressure. Magnesium plays an important role in blood pressure as well as blood sugar regulation. So the studies overwhelmingly find that people who have diabetes are notoriously low in magnesium. So some of those other signs are like, very commonly overlooked, and I'm not saying that magnesium is going to solve every single one of those problems, but I am saying that it's a good starting point. If you're dealing with those issues, give it a try. It's safe. You're not going to get addicted, like I said before. So it is a really good starting point if you're dealing with those symptoms.
Yeah, thank you for sharing those. And you and I touched before a little bit on the testing part of magnesium. So I think this would be a good point to raise with our listeners to create some awareness around, can they get tested at their healthcare provider's office or a functional medicine practitioner's office to see if they're low in magnesium? Because this is probably something they should know.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I commonly hear is people say, "Oh, I heard you talking about it on a podcast. I went to my doctor. He tested me. He said I'm fine." And this is where I get so frustrated sometimes because I feel like, and I don't want to speak ill about the medical profession, but I feel like there's often some lack of education around nutrition that really we could be all off a little bit better if there was more nutritional training when it came to medicine. So what happens is about 60% of our body's total magnesium is stored in our bones. The other 40% is in your muscles, tissues, and organs, leaving less than 1% in our blood. And the first thing that your practitioner is going to do is they're going to do a magnesium serum test and look right at your blood and tell you, well, you're fine, but they're only looking at 1% of your body's total magnesium. The truth is you can be deficient for years before it ever shows up in your blood. And by the time it shows up in your blood, we are talking emergency. This is scary. We need to worry. So there's so much we can do before it gets to that point, right? So I don't like to use magnesium tests as a barometer for deficiency, but if it is low, then you are very, very low and need to make sure that you're getting that taken care of. A better option, and this is actually what the National Institute of Health recommends, they say to go based off of your symptoms. So if you're showing all these symptoms of magnesium deficiency, you can simply take magnesium. And if those symptoms go away, then you just solved the problem. So it's a really easy kind of trial and error to figure out if you need more magnesium.
Yeah. And is there anything that listeners should be aware of, as in any counter reactions, any side effects, anything that we should know about? Or are there some people that shouldn't just go and take magnesium and they need to maybe check with their doctor before they do that?
Yes, absolutely. And of course, everything that I'm saying should not be a substitute for medical advice. My hope is that you hear what I'm saying and you take this knowledge to your functional medicine practitioner, your nutritionist, or your doctor and say, hey, I want to talk more about this. And that way you're well armed with information when you meet with them. So, a couple things to know about magnesium. It is very difficult to overdose on magnesium. The Office of Dietary Supplementation says that overdose typically happens when you take 5,000 milligrams a day, which is ridiculous. Nobody should be taking that much, right? So, just for reference, the RDA, the recommended amount that we're supposed to get is 350 to 400 milligrams. So, if you're taking 5,000, that's just too much, right? So, typically that's when overdose happens. And the reason why that happens is because we have a built-in safety mechanism, right? So if you take too much magnesium at one time, it's going to get processed through your kidneys, go through your digestive tract, and your body's going to get rid of it really quickly. What that means is you're going to be in the bathroom getting rid of all of your magnesium, and it is very unpleasant, but it's not going to hurt you, right? So that's why we hear so often that people say, well, I took magnesium and, it gave me diarrhea, gave me nausea, gave me cramping, that kind of thing. And it's simply your body getting rid of what you don't need. To counteract that, I always recommend if you're going to supplement, break up your supplements throughout the day so that you have adequate time to absorb them before you take any more. So for instance, if your bottle that you're supplementing with says, take 2 pills, take one in the morning, take one at night. That way you're giving your body time to use it and you're not getting too much at once. The people who do need to be cautious supplementing are people who have very low blood pressure because magnesium will lower your blood pressure even more. And then people who have kidney disease or kidneys that are not functioning properly because the kidneys are part of that safety mechanism. They're the one who processes out magnesium. So if they're not working properly, then they're not able to do their job.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think that's also really important information. And hopefully, most people are able to take magnesium and try that out for themselves. Now, I'm a little bit curious for maybe a more specific use case, and that is women in midlife or women around perimenopause, menopause, because I feel like there's a big change and a big shift in life as we go through this period in life. And I feel like magnesium could be a really big piece of that whole life transition. So, how does magnesium fit into midlife? I would say maybe especially even for women. And what kind of things do we notice if we're not getting enough magnesium in midlife? And then how does magnesium help with that?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like it's an understatement. It is a huge change, right? Like I've heard it even being called second puberty, right? And I really truly feel like it's not spoken about enough. Like we really do go through a huge, huge change that we hadn't seen since we were, 12, 13, 15 years old. So it definitely needs to be addressed a lot more. So when I first started researching perimenopause and menopause, I started looking at what happens in other societies. So I'm here in the United States, and we see that women really suffer a lot over here. But then I started looking at other countries, and I found that in several other countries, they don't have the symptomology that we do here. And I thought, well, what's going on? And I truly believe it comes down to diet. In the United States, about 70% of people don't get enough magnesium every single day. So it's like 7 out of 10 people who are simply not meeting their magnesium requirements. And we see all of these symptoms of menopause and perimenopause. But when we look at other countries, they're getting much more magnesium and they're not dealing with those symptoms. So that kind of was a springboard for me to do more research into this connection. And I found that of the 34 symptoms that are related to menopause, they are the exact same symptoms of magnesium deficiency. And that completely blew my mind. And there is some incredible research that is just now coming out that is showing that women with hot flashes, when they supplement with magnesium, those hot flashes start to go away. Where another symptom that we see in menopause is difficulty sleeping. And when they supplement with magnesium, the sleeping gets better. Another huge issue that women deal with at this time in their life is bone loss. We deal with the osteoporosis and our bones are getting weaker and weaker. Well, magnesium plays an incredibly important role in strengthening those bones. Oftentimes we think of bone loss associated with calcium, right? Get your calcium, make sure you're getting more calcium so you could have strong bones. The problem is without magnesium, your body is not going to absorb that calcium properly. So I like to call the magnesium like the bus, right? So magnesium is the bus that drives the calcium all around your body. So if you take a bunch of calcium and you don't have that magnesium bus to tell the calcium where to go, then that calcium winds up, in our arteries. The calcium winds up in our kidneys, causing kidney stones. And we don't want that, right? We don't want those calcifications in our body. So we want to make sure that we're taking plenty of magnesium to tell that calcium to go right into our bones. That's one of those overlooked things that people generally don't consider when they're looking at weakening bones and bone loss.
That's fascinating. I love that metaphor with the bus. I think this will be really easy for listeners to remember too, so that they can keep in mind the relationship between calcium and magnesium. I do feel that as we come into midlife and beyond, it is more difficult with the bone loss that we're experiencing, and especially if we're doing hormone replacement or anything like that. So that can be a big challenge. Now, I'm curious about whether everyone can absorb magnesium, because I have some family members and friends who are not able to absorb magnesium, which has caused all sorts of problems, especially when it comes to bone loss and things like that. So, are there certain people that cannot absorb it? And in those cases, is there anything that we can do about that?
Absolutely. That is a wonderful, wonderful question. So, we are seeing, at least here in the States, I see so many people dealing with gut issues, IBS, Crohn's, leaky gut. And in those issues, it is very difficult to absorb your nutrients, not just magnesium, but just all of them, right? And so, when it comes to magnesium, there's another alternative that you can do that is unbelievably effective, unbelievably safe, and works really, really fast. And that is simply using magnesium on your skin. So, believe it or not, our skin absorbs magnesium at an alarmingly fast rate. And so, doing things like taking magnesium baths, a great magnesium bath is your simple Epsom salt. Epsom salt is magnesium sulfate. You could get it just about everywhere. It is relatively affordable. I've even seen it at the dollar store. So, it is quite an affordable option. And doing a magnesium bath 2 to 3 times a week can be very helpful. I always recommend taking 2 cups of Epsom salt, putting it in your bath water. The bath water needs to be warm, not hot, because if it's hot, you're going to sweat it all out. And if it's warm, you're going to absorb it all in. So make sure that water is warm with 2 cups of Epsom salt. And I always recommend adding some baking soda to that water. The bicarbonate in the baking soda is going to bind to the magnesium and get it into your cells faster. So 2 cups Epsom salt, 1 cup of baking soda, soak for at least 20 minutes. Now, I fully recognize that not every person has access to a bathtub. So if you don't have a bathtub, another alternative is to do a foot bath. So soak your feet in that same solution for 20 minutes. You can do that while watching TV at night or while working underneath your desk. And that is a fabulous way to get more magnesium into your system. Another alternative that you could do is use a magnesium cream. So it's basically a lotion, looks, smells, and feels just like a regular body lotion, but it's super saturated with magnesium chloride, which sends magnesium to all the cells in your body. I really like magnesium creams because you could use them on the go. It doesn't require a bath. And you can really use it to target certain areas in your body. So for instance, if you're dealing with leg cramps, you can just apply it to those muscles and it'll relax those muscles. Or if you're dealing with inflammation in your joints, arthritis, knee pain, back pain, you could just put the magnesium on those areas and it is unbelievably effective at bringing down inflammation and really easing soreness and pain.
That's fascinating. I had no idea actually that there was such thing as magnesium creams. Would this be a good idea for things like restless legs or something like that as well?
Absolutely. Hands down, it is one of the most effective treatments for restless legs. Many times, what I hear is people will go and they'll take like a magnesium glycinate supplement at nighttime to help with their restless legs. The thing with that is, yes, it's going to send magnesium to your body, but it's actually going to send magnesium all over your body to all of the tissues, right? Some of it will get into your legs, but the rest of it's going to be dispersed. When you use a magnesium cream, you can literally put it right on those restless legs. The magnesium is going to get into that tissue and start working right away. So I really like topicals for targeting areas. So if you're dealing with headaches, you can use it on your neck, your temples, that kind of thing. If you're dealing with cramping, if you're dealing with menstrual cramps, that's another great use for magnesium cream. So yeah, it's a great way to target certain areas.
That is so interesting. I'm so curious now. I'm going to have to do some research on that to see where I can find those creams. So, and with this, I think you have some ideas where we can find these creams as well. And let our listeners know a little bit about what you offer as far as any programs, services. And I think you also have some products available. So share that with our listeners so they know how they can connect with you and what is on offer for them.
Absolutely. So, back to my original story, when I was dealing with all these issues, I started taking magnesium pills, but those pills weren't giving me the benefits that I was really looking for. It turns out I was dealing with a bunch of gut issues. I was dealing with leaky gut. I was really struggling to absorb my nutrients. So, I started using topical magnesium, and that's what really took my health and wellness to the next level. So, when I went through that process, I thought, wait a second, we need to get magnesium into the hands of everybody who struggles to feel their best. And that's what made me start researching and educating and putting all this information out there. But what I found was when it came to topical magnesium creams, there was so much inconsistency in the market. You had people selling it on Etsy, and you don't know how much magnesium is in there. And then you had like chiropractors selling like sticky medicine smelling magnesium creams that were just very unpleasant. So I thought, how can we make this into something that people look forward to using, that they can integrate into their lifestyle, and that works well and is clinically researched? And that's what caused me to create an entire line of magnesium creams that are all based off of scientific research, based off of scientific studies, and that they look, feel, and smell just like your regular body moisturizer. So it's something you want to use every single day. And we launched it about 3 years ago. We've sold out 10 times so far. It has been very well received. It is changing lives all across the world. And it's been exciting to be able to help people manage their magnesium journey.
Yeah. And where do you ship to? Just the US, or can people internationally buy your products as well?
Yep, we ship all over the world. So we ship regularly to internationally to all just every country you can imagine.
Amazing. And then you mentioned the checklist. So we'll be linking to that in the show notes for our listeners as well. Anything else that if somebody would like, for example, a bit of consultation or they have some questions, do you offer anything like that as well?
Absolutely. Yes. I'm across all of our social media channels. We're on Instagram. We're very active on Instagram and TikTok. And then we just recently launched a Facebook group where you can come ask all of your questions, get the support and help you need, and really interact with other people who are on a similar journey as you are.
Wonderful. And of course, we will be linking to all of Natalie's offerings in the show notes, as I just mentioned. So be sure to check there for the products, the creams. Do you have other magnesium products available or focused on creams at the moment?
Yeah, we focus strictly on creams because we find that it can work for everybody. It can work for children. You can use it on your elderly grandmother and everybody in between without having to deal with side effects.
Amazing. So we'll link to that. You can find your magnesium creams there and give that a shot and see if that works for you. And of course, we'd love to know what your experiences are like. If you feel that you're magnesium deficient and you want to try this out, tell us what changes for you. What's been your experience? What things have gotten better in your life? I have a feeling that there might be a few things that are changing for the better. It did for me, certainly, when I started supplementing with magnesium. So I can only echo what Natalie has been sharing with us, that it has been a complete game changer, especially when it comes to perimenopause. That has been a big one. So, yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Natalie, for being here today and sharing all this wisdom that you have gathered with your personal journey and your research and the products that you offer with our listeners. I feel this was a long time coming that we had an episode about magnesium. So, thank you for sharing all of that. I truly appreciate you being here today.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. And thank you for what you're doing to spread the message of health and wellness to everybody around the world.
No, thank you. I feel like we need to have the information and the options to take charge of our own health. In many cases, like you said, test results come back normal, blood work comes back normal, and yet we know that something is not right. And in those cases, we definitely need to advocate for our own health. So thank you for being part of that journey. And we'll keep spreading the word about magnesium, Natalie. And take care. And thanks so much for coming on today.
Take care.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Jōrni Podcast, please support us by subscribing, sharing on social media, and leaving us a review. We appreciate you. And you can find more of The Jōrni on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and our website, thejorni.com. Sending you love and courage, and see you next time.